Welcome. Today, we want to tackle a topic that we know you're all thinking about because we hear it from
Everywhere.
friends, family, students, graduates.
Well, and you're hearing it on every news outlet.
That's right.
Mhm.
And it's how to either relaunch a career or pivot in your career or just change jobs
Right.
in uncertain economic times.
Right. And there's good reason to hit the panic button when you're being overwhelmed with all of these
Words like recession and tight job market and all those kinds of things, right?
But I think it's really important that we start with defining the difference between a tight labor market versus a tight job market. Can you explain that?
Sure. So we're coming out of post-COVID, a tight labor market. When a tight labor market means that there are more jobs than there are people. So it's hard or difficult, it's tight for companies, employers to get people. Right. So there are more jobs than there are people. Right. A tight job market is the flip. We have not moved into a tight job market, by the way. For us to undo what has happened over the last 2 years is not going to happen overnight. Right. You're going to see it first in financial markets because that's what's with the interest rate change and those kinds of changes.
So those jobs are going to be affected. Right.
So we're going to hear it. The banks, if you're looking to work at Goldman Sachs, this probably would be not the ideal time to go there. You might see some of the larger financial institutions either maybe not laying people off. We're not anything close to that yet, but maybe having some hiring freezes, maybe being a little bit more selective about the jobs that they fill. Right. But it's not this, the switch can't flip that quickly. So we want to make sure that you're just bring down any alarm that you have. Okay. Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
So start there. But what should or can people be doing during this time? Right.
Well, when we had this great abundance of jobs for the last couple of years, you could be sloppy. Right. And still get a job. You could not really be well qualified. You could have a crappy resume. You could get in without doing things right. Yeah. You have to do things right now. Okay. So you've got to make sure that your resume is top notch, right? Absolutely. That you are really thoughtful about where you're looking for jobs. You're not just throwing anything out there knowing that someone will hire you. Right.
So it's important that you have a good brand. Yeah. It's important that you know the audience that you're speaking to. And it's also really important that you are being clean with your language and your messaging and your story
and your strategy. So when there's an abundance of jobs, there is more likelihood that you can find a job through an ATS or through an easy referral. So you have to be a little bit more strategic. Networking is always important. It's more important when employers are a little more selective. I think another piece to consider is if you're a finance person who's always worked in banking and there may not be as many opportunities, or we might see just a slowdown there, think about where your skills could be repurposed. Right. Every organization needs finance people. Right. So look at, and this comes to, that's the other part of like doing this right. It's doing the research, looking at, okay, I have these skills. I've typically applied them here. Maybe this isn't the greatest place. There's not a lot of growth here, but heck, there's a ton of growth in healthcare. Right. There's a ton of growth in pharmaceuticals. Right. How could I bring my skills there? Right. Right. So getting a little creative with the way you're coming at things. Exactly. If your particular industry is one that is being hit by these uncertain times. I think another one, we always say this, you have to have a B plan. I think that it's really helpful to consider work in alternative ways. Now, if you are the primary earner in your home and you need a full-time job with benefits, you don't have that flexibility, but a lot of the people who work with us do. So you may be looking for that full-time permanent job, but you may be looking at a time where your department isn't hiring, or that organization where you want to work isn't hiring. Right. Just because the job no longer can be filled doesn't mean the work goes away. Right. So consider talking to that team leader or that recruiter, that employer, and saying, look, I understand that you had to take that job posting down because you have a hiring freeze or because that department's not hiring, but you still have the work. Right. We could talk about how I could still do that work for you on a project basis, as a consultant, as a contractor, because it's important to know that those two budgets are separate. So FTE, full-time equivalent hiring, is one budget. Contract work comes from a totally different revenue source. So you don't have to worry about that as much. So just a good little thing to know as you're navigating this.
Such a great strategy. Such a great strategy. Well, the last one that we always like to talk about, especially when it comes to, you know, the energy that you're bringing to networking or, an interview, if you're down that path already as a returner, is your mindset. How are you talking to yourself? Are you buying into the rhetoric that is out there that is telling you that everything is bad and negative and you should be in complete fear? And if you're acting from that place of fear, that energy comes through.
Absolutely does.
It comes through, and it's something that can really impede you from landing those interviews.
And it comes through in two really impactful ways, because as a hiring manager, I want to hire positive people, especially if we're navigating some uncertain waters. And I want to hire someone who's confident.
Right.
And, and you're not showing me that if you're coming with that kind of negative.
No, and then how it affects you personally is you might just take whatever comes your way. You might not be as selective. And yes, do you have to be a little more discerning if there's not,
Perhaps,
many jobs in your particular industry, of course, but you don't want to land yourself in a job that you're only going to stay in for a short period of time because you're so miserable and it depletes your life. So acting from that place of fear, letting that fear mindset run you can really mess with you. So just be aware of it.
Yeah. And look at what you're consuming.
Right.
I mean, you have the choice to turn off that news station, not listen to that negative podcast. Look at what you are choosing
to put in your path.
Exactly. And try to find both positive messaging and positive people.
Yes.
Like us. So if you like what you heard today, please let us know. Please subscribe. We have new content coming out every Monday.
Yes, we do.
And you can learn more about us at www.preparetoLaunchU.com.